Pigweed here. Today we review a homemade gin and discuss liquor. Hello and welcome to Beer and Conversation with Pigweed and Crowhill. Good evening, Crowhill.
Good evening, Pigweed.
What is on your mind?
Well, I was just reading the gospel account the other day of when Jesus turned water into brandy.
Water into brandy.
Water into brandy. And I was thinking that was pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
These people had never heard of brandy before.
Yeah.
Because the brandy didn't even exist back then.
It's remarkable.
It is, yeah. And that was a new thing. I mean, that's how brandy came into the world, was at the wedding of Cana when Jesus turned water into brandy.
I think maybe we might need to pull out the old Bible and reread that one. I was over there on the shelf.
You don't think I've got that right?
I don't think you got that quite right.
Okay. Well, sorry.
I think it was a little. I think liquor came a little later.
Liquor came a little later, not in the year 30 or whatever that was. No.
I think you got a few centuries to go.
Okay, so we'll clear that up later. But first, I wanted to introduce you to my homemade gin. Now, I know that you have a problem with gin.
Well, hold it up to the light there. Let me have a good look at it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's already suspicious, so I'll tell you in a couple of ways.
Yes.
The label's weird, the color's weird,
Yes.
and sometimes I have an allergic reaction to it. And so that tells me there's something in the gin that is not in other boozes, and we'll have to explore that.
Yeah.
But now I'll explore it right now, if you don't mind.
That's right. Let's go for it. So this is a gin and tonic made with my homemade gin.
With not very clear gin.
Not very clear gin. It's it almost looks like rum.
All right. Trusting you here. What do you think?
I think it's much more. It's much more aromatic.
Yeah, it smells spicy.
Yes, there's a lot more spice going on than. So gin is made with juniper berries.
So that's what you're smelling. Is the juniper berries.
Yeah. So there's a lot of gin. Typically, we'll get into this more later, but gin is basically vodka with botanicals added to it.
That's about it.
And the botanicals are usually juniper berries, but they don't have to be. They can be other things. So
what you've got cardamom, stars.
yes, there's a lot of interesting things.
Reasons why your gin is brown.
Yes, well, it's quite an interesting collection. So I'll actually pull up the recipe.
Okay.
Although I mean it is a ancient family secret, so I don't want to say too much about
Don't reveal all of it.
I know. So cardamom, coriander, licorice root, star anise, angelica root.
Angelica root.
Yeah.
Well, there's one of them that I thought was particularly the angelica root. Yeah.
Yeah. Like what in the world is angelica root?
I don't know. Where'd you find that?
I asked ChatGPT for some ideas about.
Where'd you find the root?
You
Chinaman?
Yeah, you buy it from various stores, and there's an Indian store in the neighborhood that has every kind of crazy spice you can think of. That's where I got my cubic ton of.
Yeah, did they tell you what the magical properties were?
Exactly.
Not okay. So and then you poured it into gin liquor.
So
the spices that go into gin.
So gin is basically just alcohol that's had some botanicals added to it. But I'm sorry, like vodka. But what I did was I bought Everclear, which is
back it up one step.
Grain alcohol.
Yeah,
grain alcohol is. The best I could get was 189 proof. Now, 200 proof is pure alcohol. You can't buy that, apparently. So 189 proof was the closest I could get. But gin is 80 proof. So what I had to do is do a little bit of math and figure out how much 189 proof grain alcohol and how much water makes 80 proof. So you figured that out. That's not hard. And then you add your botanicals, and you let it sit for a couple of weeks, and it absorbs the flavor. So that's basically all there is to it.
That is all there is to it. So the show we did on vodka, it turns out that a lot of vodka makers aren't vodka makers at all.
They don't distill anything.
There are a few places that just do industrial levels of grain alcohol.
Right, and they buy that stuff.
They buy it by the ton, and then they play with it a little bit.
Yeah, they do a little bit of processing, and they put it in a bottle and put a label on it. Yeah, and that's that. And they say they made vodka. So I say, okay, fine, I'll make gin. So knowing that you don't like juniper berries, I tried various different concoctions of gin, and this is what we get.
Yeah, it's pretty. I think
it's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting the licorice.
Yeah,
and the angelica root.
Yes,
no doubt,
because we all know the flavor of angelica root. Yeah, I think maybe I should tone down the licorice just a touch, but it's interesting. It's a nice flavor.
It's very nice.
Mm-hmm.
And so
let's
so since vodka is made with potatoes,
well, that's the story,
right?
Yeah. Why don't we back up a little bit?
Okay, yeah.
And
I mean, where's the booze come from?
Exactly. So we're beer in conversation. We're usually dealing with fermented beverages,
and we create alcohol ourselves, but it's not the same as booze.
No. So what we do is we brew beer, and we basically take barley malt and extract the sugars from it. Add yeast to that,
and you extract it. It's not a very scientific process.
No,
put it in hot water and let it sit.
That's right. And then you get the sugars out of it. You add some yeast, and the yeast converts the sugars into carbon dioxide and alcohol.
Right.
And that's called fermentation.
Yes.
Now, liquors are a result of distillation, which is a different process.
But there's still some mashing going on.
Yes. So what has to happen is first you have to do some fermentation to make some
sugary liquid.
Yeah. Yes. You have to ferment that so you get a base, and then what you do is you distill, and what that means is, alcohol is a different boiling point than water. Mm-hmm. So if you have a mixture of alcohol and water, like beer or wine or some other fermented beverage, if you boil that, then the first thing that comes off, the first thing that evaporates out of the boil would be the alcohol. And that's the distillation process. Right. So you take...
I think a boil is 212.
Well, boiling water is 212, but boiling alcohol is something like 175 or something like that. So it boils at a different stage. So if you were to take a beer and heat it up, at a certain point it would get hot enough for the alcohol to boil off, but the water would not boil off.
Right. Which is probably the last thing you want. But yes. You see these twisty coils that coming out of a moonshine still.
Yes.
So what's going on?
So that's where it's just cooling down. So if you imagine you're boiling the alcohol off of your beer or whatever it is.
Right. So the water is not steaming off.
Yeah. It's the alcohol that's sealing off, and then it's cooling down in the coils and then dripping out in the end as alcohol.
Right.
Yeah, and apparently, and I've never done distillation because that's illegal in the state of Maryland. I don't do that. But if you do distillation, apparently it's not only the alcohol that boils off. There's always some sort of a mixture. You like to think that, like, once you get to a certain temperature, just the alcohol is boiling. It doesn't really work that way.
Well, at Secrets had a tour where they explained it, and they said, yes, that's why you have to do multiple boils. So if you do it, say 5 times or 7 times or whatever the certain recommended number is, you're getting more and more impurities out.
Yes.
And he says the more cycles of boiling, the more impurities that go out, but you're also going to be losing some alcohol.
Yes.
So to save money, you might just do 3 and maintain some of the
That's why you see things
stuff.
like triple distilled or something like that.
Yes. And most likely the number of distillation cycles is where it's going to end up on the shelf in a liquor store.
Bottom shelf is 2 distillations.
Yes.
The next shelf is, So in a way...
Well, we're going to talk about hangovers later, but he's saying that this is how you know that you're getting most of the impurities out, and the more impurities that you have in your beer, the more likely you have hangovers.
So in a way, the distillation process for alcohol is similar to the distillation process for petroleum. Like when they take
crude.
raw crude. what they do is they have this big column, and they boil the crude, and different distillates will come out at different levels in the stack. Okay, so like at a certain level, something will come out. Another as you go up the stack, and that's how they get diesel fuel versus gasoline versus other kinds of things they get out of the crude oil. Well, something similar is going on with the distillation of alcohol. But when you talk about the impurities, you don't only get ethanol in this process. Sometimes there's also methanol or other kinds of things that you really don't want to drink.
And yes, and I think methanol burns off even sooner.
Yeah.
And so if your temperature is not high enough, then you're including the methanol in with your ethanol.
Yeah. So one rule of thumb I read on some site about distillation is the first couple ounces that come out, throw that away, because that's where where a lot of the methanol is coming out.
Exactly. Right. And any backwoods Kentucky moonshiner will be aware of that.
That's right. They will know. So that's distillation versus fermentation. Apparently, some guy named Al-Kindi, he was in the Arab world, might have been the first to distill alcohol in the 9th century. So Jesus probably didn't. I mean, I suppose he could have turned water into brandy because he wasn't really worried about the distillation process. Right. But yeah, I don't think so.
All right. So back to my question that beer is from barley and vodka is from potatoes is not altogether true.
Well, you can make a fermented beverage from anything that has carbohydrates in it.
Yes, so it's not like different things are coming out. Yes, maybe if it's coming from corn or wheat or rye or potatoes or sorghum or whatever.
Yeah.
Yes, it's different, but in the science world, you're really just seeing the carbohydrates.
Yeah.
And the alcohol you're getting is ethanol. It's not different alcohols are coming. It's all just the same thing, but you can get it from multiple sources.
Yes.
Now, I think the reason we associate it with potatoes is because they're so plentiful in Russia, and Russia makes so much vodka.
Yes.
But it doesn't have to be the case.
And you can make vodka from potatoes, but a lot of times it's made from grain. It's made from wheat or some other thing. And here's the thing that's somewhat of a mystery to me. Is whenever you do a distillation, what comes out is clear.
Yes.
What comes out is basically just alcohol,
It's
right?
just alcohol.
And then the character that it gets later, whether it becomes whiskey or bourbon or some other kind of thing, that has to do with what you do after the distillation process.
It's just alcohol.
But still, the definition of bourbon requires a certain mix of grains in the mash, and that's a little bit of a mystery to me, and I'd like to talk to somebody who's an expert about this to find out why does that really matter? Because after the distillation process, all you're getting is the alcohol anyway. Right. There's got to be something. There's going to be something about the character of the grains in the mash that comes through in that distillation process, or else why would they be doing this?
Would you want to hear about bourbon school?
I do, yeah.
So on our trip back from Mexico, we deliberately went through Kentucky and went there to the largest cave network in Mammoth Cave. And a couple of other things. We were in Bardstown, where has a couple of distilleries. And then there was the Bourbon Museum. Mm-hmm. So then we got a little walkthrough on Bourbon Museum, and yes, while whiskey is generally barley, bourbon has to be 51% corn.
Yes.
And it also has to be in charred oak barrels.
Yes.
New charred oak barrels.
Yes.
So the story goes, as I recall, this was unintentional. This was wood from a barn that had burned down.
Oh, wow.
Then they decided to use the wood anyway to make the barrels. Mm-hmm. These barrels went down the Mississippi to
New
Orleans. Yeah. And it became so popular that people started referring to it. It's being served on Bourbon Street.
Okay.
And so it's not Bourbon Street wasn't named after the liquor. the liquor was named after the street.
Interesting.
Which is so it's a French. The Bourbons were the were the French aristocrats.
Yeah.
So people started saying, "Hey, give me some of that bourbon," referring to this liquor that they were serving.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting.
And so then they realized, wait a minute, we might be onto something, and began to deliberately char the wood which had started as an accident.
Did I tell you about my attempt to make homemade bourbon?
How did that go?
So once again, I do not do distillation because that's against the law. So of course I don't do that. What I did was similar to what I did with gin here. Is I took some grain alcohol and I reduced it down to 80 proof, and I took some oak chips.
Okay.
And I charred them.
Yeah, right.
On the grill.
That's perfectly
and then I soaked that mixture in the oak chips that had been charred, and I made something that tasted somewhat like bourbon. Right. And it wasn't the best in the world, but that's, you can do different kind of experiments like that and make your own.
Yeah, they have all kinds of interesting little kits and mini barrels and stuff like that. Which that would be one.
Your
thing.
brother has one of those little barrels.
He does have one of those little barrels.
Yeah. So let's just go through a couple things here. So first, liquor versus liqueur versus fortified wines. Okay. So kind of going up the scale, you've got things like beer, wine, mead. That's on the low end of the alcohol schedule. And then as you go up, you have fortified wines, liqueurs, and liquor. Fortified wines are where you take a wine and add maybe some brandy and some sugar and some other flavors to it. That's how you make something like port or sherry or something like that.
How about MD 2020 and Richard's Wild Irish Rose?
Yeah, I'm not so convinced. I don't know. I know very much about those.
Well, they're the cheapest high octane wine that you could buy. It's basically for drunks and for college kids.
Yeah.
And if you take one of those and you put it in the freezer, so that you can barely taste it,
right?
Yeah, it's got a real kick to it. How do you think there would be just like a cheap wine with some grain alcohol,
probably infused, something like that? Yeah,
right. To get it up to 15% rather than with a regular wine strength.
Yeah, regular wine would be like 12%. So then you have liqueurs, which are things like Bailey's or something like that, where basically it's amaretto, that sort of thing. It's sweet and it's not as strong as a liquor. Liquors are usually around 80 proof. Now let's talk about proof for a minute.
Yeah.
For some crazy reason,
no, it's a funny system.
I know. What? It's just twice.
Why
the
is it always the half thing?
I know. So pure alcohol is 200 proof. Why is that? I don't know. And then, so if you have something that's 80 proof, what that means is that's 40% alcohol.
Yeah. Like, and the math isn't really very difficult.
Yeah, it's not difficult, but it's still,
weird that you'd have to do it.
It's still weird. That's right. Yeah. So then, why are some liquors clear and some are colored?
Right. So they're all clear, like you say.
They come out clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so your bourbon comes from this charred barrel. Mm-hmm. So it's burnt wood gives us depending on what else you do with it, just comes out with a nice brown color and smoky flavor.
And from what I understand, some other liquors are aged in like old wine barrels or something like that, so they get the color from that sort of thing. So you have some of the clear liquors would be like vodka and gin. Rum can be either clear or colored, and then tequila.
But where does rum tend to get its sugars from?
Sugar cane.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not from grain.
No. Yeah, so let's go through the different. So the main categories of liquor would be vodka, gin, tequila, rum, whiskey, and brandy. So vodka, as we mentioned, could come from potatoes, but it's often made from grain, from wheat, from barley, from whatever is available. Gin is basically just vodka with botanicals added, like what I did with this one.
Primarily what you associate with is juniper.
Yes, primarily juniper berries. Tequila is made from the agave plant. And it's a clear liquor.
Yes, I got a tequila story.
Oh, good.
So tequila is like champagne.
Yes.
In that it is a proprietary name.
Mm-hmm.
And I lived in Guadalajara, in Jalisco, Mexico, and it's not far, less than maybe an hour away, is the town of Tequila. And that's where it is. That's agave plants are everywhere, and they have made a tourist trip out of this.
Yeah.
There's the Tequila Express it's just a train that just runs from Guadalajara to Tequila.
Mm-hmm.
They start dosing you up with tequila when you get on the train at 10 a.m.
Right. Yes.
And there's a mariachi band, and you get there, you get the tour, then there's lunch, and there's entertainment and comedians that I could follow it up until the punchline, right? Because there's always like a clever play on words.
Oh, yeah, and
man,
you're not quite getting
it.
it.
Isn't there yet?
That's right.
It's like, all right, and that's not that funny. So anyway, yes, but the deal is good tequila, a good whiskey and bourbon is aged.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So the grain obviously grows in half a summer.
Yeah.
But the time that takes for it to get good is on the back end.
Yes.
Tequila's on the front end. So
Oh.
those agave plants take 10 years.
Wow.
To become ready.
Okay.
But once they have distilled it, it's the cheaper stuff is ready to drink right away. If you see añejo, that's the word for aged.
Yeah.
So, it does mellow out a little bit. But, so the good stuff takes the same amount of time. It's just where the time takes.
Okay.
On the agave.
Okay. So what exactly is agave?
Yeah, it's a big cactus thing. It's about, it's about 3-4 feet across. There's one of the brands is called the Humidor, and that's the name of the guy who goes out there with the special, a special rake on the end is a sort of a curved blade.
Yeah.
That takes off the sprouting parts of it, just leaves the heart, and you ferment, you crush and ferment that, and that's what becomes the booze.
Okay,
so,
interesting. I wouldn't have thought of a cactus as a source of sugar.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Okay, so that's vodka, gin, tequila. Rum is made from sugarcane, and it became popular in the 17th century when we had ships, going around in the Caribbean and all that kind of stuff. Right?
Yeah, that was probably in the time of the colonies, probably the biggest, most popular booze at the time, right?
Yeah. And then whiskey is made from various grains. Now there is a funny thing about whiskey, which is there's whiskey with a EY and there's whiskey with just a Y.
Yes.
And so whiskey with just the Y is Canadian, Scotland, and Japan.
Yeah.
Whiskey with an EY is everything else. So you have Kentucky bourbon, all that. That's all whiskey with an EY. But Canadian, Scottish, and Japanese whiskeys are with no E for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did not know that.
I don't know why. And then brandy, which could have been the earliest liquor in Europe, is made from wine. So like the other ones are mostly made from grains. Brandy is made from fermented wine. Distilled wine.
In the boozes that we've talked about and the various grains, the mash is done at a specific temperature. What about grape? What about wine? Do you have to boil? Do you boil the after you get in there and stomp around for a while?
No. So what you do to make wine is obviously have grapes, and you crush the grapes,
right.
And whether it's a white wine or a red wine
depends on the color of the grape.
No.
Dang.
So to some extent it does, but it also it mostly depends on whether you leave it on the skins or not. You can make a white wine from a red grape.
Shut up.
If you don't leave it on the skins.
Well,
if you just press it and take the juice and make a white wine. So if they leave it on the skins impart some of that red coloring into the wine. But you don't have to boil it, unlike beer. You basically just crush the grapes, get the grape juice, add the yeast, and ferment it, and off you go.
There you go.
Then you get the wine. And then if you want to make brandy, you distill the wine.
So you're boiling off some of the water.
Yeah. And you're boiling off the alcohol
I mean,
from,
right.
Yeah, from the wine. Now,
So you're
cognac.
separating but you're separating the alcohol from the non-alcohol.
Yes.
But not entirely, right? I mean, it's not,
Well,
you're not creating 100 proof.
Yes.
For the brandy.
Well, that's the part of the process that still mystifies me.
or do you circle back and bring the alcohol in, and then
somehow you're bringing some flavor back in? Like, I don't know why cognac has flavor, has color. I mean, They have to age it in something, right? But so brandy is the generic term, and you have different levels of brandy. You have VSOP and SO. There's like, if you go to the liquor store and you look, so there's different levels of brandy. But cognac is sort of like champagne or tequila. It's something that's only made in a particular area. Cognac means it's made in that area in France. Yeah. Other kinds of brandy are just brandy. So.
Well, it's one of those things.
So that's a whirlwind tour of liquor, like, where it came from and what proof means and different types. But there's a lot more interesting things to talk about.
How about some liquor myths?
Okay.
These are some of these things that you hear, and I just want, let me acknowledge here, this came from our friends over at Skeptoid.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he said he put the word out and said, how about some, I mean, they're all about debunking myths. Mm-hmm. So he said, so send me your myths. And he said, just his inbox got clogged with people.
How about this one? Beer before liquor, never sicker.
Yes. I didn't get to that one. I'm sorry you didn't, but I would say...
I have an answer for that. But okay,
all right, we'll do yours.
Yeah.
How about, is it necessary to let wine breathe? Now, how often do you... Well, I don't hang out with enough wine drinkers to even know if people think that's a thing. Mm-hmm. Is it a thing? Do wine drinkers generally believe that, or do they just pop the cork and pour the glass?
So generally speaking, with a red wine, people believe that after you open it, you should let it sit for a couple of minutes before you drink it.
Right. Yeah. And so he says there's nothing to that.
Well, so I...
says there's almost nothing to that.
Yeah, exactly. So because I would agree that allowing it to breathe in the bottle isn't going to do anything. However, if you take a red wine...
So they say decanter.
Yeah. If you take a red wine and put it in a blender...
Right.
It sounds like a horrible thing to do, okay? But if you take a red wine, try this sometime. Take a red wine, take a sip of it, put it in the blender, blend it for 30 seconds, let the foam settle down, and then try it again. Completely different taste.
Well, Skeptoid says no.
Well...
They say
no. But he's not talking about the blending thing. Is he talking about the blending thing?
He said first off, taking the top off the bottle is going to do absolutely zero.
Yeah, because there's like no connection. There's no
surface area.
Surface area is there's no surface area being.
He says if it smells funky because there are additional sulfides that were trapped in the bottle, then you are going to benefit from that.
Yeah.
But he says that's like 1 in 75 bottles is the number that he gave. So by itself, if it smells funky, yes, that's the way to do it. Of course, when we're talking about surface area, nothing's going to happen by taking the top off. Pouring in a decanter is obviously increasing the surface area.
Yeah.
And as you say,
blending
it is
completely changes.
Yes, but only if you get a funky smell off of the top to begin with.
See, I would disagree with Skeptoid about this because I've done it myself, and blending it actually does change the flavor of the wine.
All right.
In my experience.
Moving on. Can you go blind from drinking bad liquor?
Well, yes, if you live back in the 1920s.
Yes, that's
when the federal government was adding things to the liquor so that you wouldn't drink it.
Yes, to discourage you, or just some unethical home, bathroom gin guy.
Yeah.
Then
who doesn't get rid of that first little bit that comes out of the distillate. That's
yes,
right,
yes. That if the methanol has not been removed, and then you add methanol, but apparently it doesn't take very much. Concentrated methanol really does go for the eyes, but the idea that just somebody from just because you're drinking backwoods moonshine, drinking too much of it or over a certain amount of time, that's unlikely to be the case. Now, why is moonshine is mostly corn? Every time Now, is it because that's how they like it, or it's just the easiest thing to get your hands on?
I think it's because it's more available.
Yeah, more available. I'm sure. So, does the shape of the glass really matter? And so
that's an interesting one, because you'll see these maps.
Yes.
Where people will draw out.
Yeah, there's one over there on the wall there, and that shows you each type of, and that's just for beer.
Yeah, here's the shape of your tongue, and you're going to get this flavor here, and then the
Brandy is in the rounded.
Yeah, so the theory is the shape of the glass influences like where it lands in your mouth or something, and then that will affect the flavor of the.
Well, also the way that it captures the aromatics.
Now that is definitely a real thing.
Yes. I like to. I won't drink out of a bottle or a can anymore. I'll pour a Miller Lite into a red Solo cup, just because the smell is part of the experience.
Yes.
Now, does the smell change the flavor of the beer? Probably no, it doesn't. But the experience of the drink.
Yeah.
Is part of that, and so what he gets to is there are a lot of associations to the experience. If you're blind taste testing various, you are not going to recognize any difference, but does acknowledge the enjoyment of the beverage in its traditional glass and the experiences you're sharing. I totally get that.
Well, see, I would make this distinction. If you were to take two liquors and you pour one in a shot glass, you take one liquor and you pour it in a shot glass and you also pour it in a snifter.
Yeah.
Okay. And in the shot glass, whatever aroma there is kind of just going away. But in the snifter, it's lingering in the glass there.
Yeah.
So when you drink it, you're going to get a lot more of the aroma of the liquor from a snifter than you're going to get from a shot glass. So I would say that in that case, the glass does make a difference, because the snifter, it's one of those glasses that you're only pouring the liquor in the bottom 10% of the glass.
Yes.
And there's all this room for the aroma to collect in the glass. So I think that does make it. Did he discuss that at all?
He kind of poo-pooed it. And said it had more to do with the. Here you go. Let me give it to you here. It says the search for controlled blinded testing, trying to find out whether people find certain drinks better when served in optimal glasses, and you're likely to be disappointed. That mostly these come from glassware sellers.
Well, see, I agree with that in terms of the difference between this shaped glass and this shaped glass. But when you have a radically different shape, two completely different shapes, like a shot glass and a snifter, it's got to make a difference, because the aroma is being captured in the glass.
He's saying that most of it is captured in the multi-sensor experience of a combination of sensory experiences enhanced with tradition, and that you get out your special glasses for your special drink, and it all makes the whole experience more special. And whether or not the difference between a red Solo cup and a glass,
well, I think this calls for an experiment. I think we need to get some brandy and try it in two different shaped glasses and see what we think.
Yeah, well, I don't really like brandy enough to know that. But I also like it in terms of the multi-sensory experience.
Yeah.
Does it really taste different from a red Solo cup or a glass? Who knows? But the experience to me is the glass touching the, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That just the associations, I think.
And sometimes the red Solo cup actually smells like plastic. So, there is that.
So am I done with my? So this is glass shape. I thought I had another one. Let wine breathe. can hair of the dog cure a hangover?
Oh, okay, that's an interesting one.
And so, no. It's all you're really doing is putting off the hangover until later. So you're just sort of getting a little good feel from the night before. Your body has finished metabolizing most of the ethanol that you drank, and it's still working on metabolizing the methanol, which happens more slowly. And now you pour another drink in there, and all you've done is
just delayed it.
It's just delayed the process.
Well, see, that to me, like, there are certain rules I think people have to have around drinking. I think one of the rules is when you're drinking in the morning to compensate for your drinking in the evening, that's a pretty clear sign of a problem.
How are you doing? Yeah, you're just getting drunk in the morning.
Yeah,
and going, hey, it did help. Yeah, it did help, but now you're drunk now.
It helped because you're drunk.
It's 9:00.
That's right. Yeah, that's probably not a good way to go.
So there was another. So we talked about the alcohol is really just alcohol. We had a mutual friend. And she says, to me, vodka doesn't, I don't really get drunk off of vodka. In fact, vodka kind of sobers me up. And
sure. Right.
You're from the science high school that we went to. That's not how science works.
Yeah.
It's just, it's just
the alcohol in vodka is the same as the alcohol in anything
else. I stopped drinking tequila because I'm a mean drunk. It really is. Well, your body doesn't care about the source that it came from an agave plant, and not from that. It's not going to attack your body in some different way.
There are all kinds of strange articles about how this kind of alcohol does this for you.
Right.
Based on the grain or whatever. But that was like 7 steps back in the process, and it really doesn't. What you're dealing with is completely different from. So maybe agave by itself has certain effects on your body.
Exactly.
But once you've turned it into alcohol and made tequila out of it.
During the fermentation process, it has killed whatever those enzymes or whatever it is that's supposed to have some health benefits.
Distillation, the fermentation and then the distillation, you're not getting any of that stuff anymore. It's almost like thinking, I'm getting the benefits of wheat when I drink when I drink a whiskey.
Right, because wheat contains these enzymes that are good for this. Yes, when it's wheat...
But not after you've fermented it and distilled it and put it
boiled
in a barrel
it
and put it in a barrel for 3 years.
Filled it up with ethanol. Crying out loud. Hold on, I thought I had one more. There was
I had one
for the end.
Beer before liquor, never sicker. Yeah. So there's this idea that if you drink beer and then you drink liquor,
beer before okay, yeah.
Then you're going to have a worse day the next day than if you were to drink liquor and then beer or something like that.
Yes. Yeah. Science-wise, what do you feel about that?
It's complete nonsense.
It doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't work like that. Your body, when you drink beer or you drink whiskey or whatever, your body is not saying, this is alcohol from a beer. Oh, this is alcohol from a whiskey. No, it's just alcohol that's going into your stomach.
Oh, no, the other one was drinking through a straw makes you get drunk faster.
Well, the thing about that is that the alcohol sinks to the bottom of the glass. Is that right?
Well, in part, but the other is you just tend to drink faster.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? It's like, yes, if you drink booze faster...
You get drunk faster.
That's
right.
And so, so as far as the mechanism...
Yeah.
Again, the alcohol doesn't really care.
Right. Your body doesn't care where the alcohol came from.
Yeah. It doesn't see variety.
So the whole beer before liquor never sicker thing really comes down to how much you drank. Because if you were like drinking a bunch of beer and then you were getting a little bit drunk and then you started drinking liquor, you probably ended up drinking a whole lot of alcohol.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So that's just where you get.
All right. Well, I move on to the next topic. Why don't you top me off here?
Yeah. Okay.
And this next topic is, well, what is going on with scientifically? What is going on with your body? What is this warm, fuzzy feeling and this increased? And why does my dancing get so much better and my jokes are so much funnier?
Yeah. It's the spirit of.
Yeah. Why are the girls so much more attracted to me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you remember that video?
What's going on?
Do you remember that video that shows? It's a horrible video from one perspective, but it's also pretty funny. It shows this picture of an old hag,
right?
And then at the bottom it shows how many beers you've had.
Yeah, right. And then by 2 a.m., I'm looking so bad, is she?
That's right. She's pretty good looking after 8
yes.
beers.
So what exactly is all of that? Well, as far as I can tell. 20% of the alcohol goes into your bloodstream through the stomach, and the rest of it goes into your bloodstream through the small intestine. In fact, it starts even in your mouth, right? It starts working its way through your body and through your nervous system, and the alcohol stimulates the release of dopamine and serotonin, sometimes referred to as the feel-good hormones.
Yes.
So that's sort of what's going on in the brain, and then the alcohol depresses your central nervous system and interferes with your brain's communication pathways, affecting how your brain processes information. So this is not very scientific in terms of exactly what's going on in terms of the depressing of the... But it would probably be more academic than I would understand anyway. But do you have any more science for me?
Well, so I think there's something about alcohol affecting the way certain neurons transmit information.
Okay, so that's that would be the interference.
Yeah, the cloudiness thing. And obviously, but
why would we find that fun?
Well, I think those are two separate processes. I think there's two separate things going on.
Serotonin.
I think the serotonin is one side of it. So that's giving you the happy, fun feeling. And then there's also the cloudiness and the bad judgment, and that's another side of it. So I think it's affecting you in different. Now, what somebody needs to do is create a kind of a drink that gives you the serotonin and the good side of it without giving you the...
from the Brave New World.
Well, it's actually in Star Trek, of course. They have synthahol.
There's the reference.
Yeah, synthahol in Star Trek.
Right. And then the government gets its hands on it.
Exactly.
And it says, look, we don't have any jobs for you. Here's some minimal housing
and some synthahol
or
what is the thing they take in Brave New World?
Huge TV, Soma,
yes. Yeah. Here's your Soma pills,
and here's some
today.
Huge TVs and some game controllers and some Soma, and just allow the elites to live their lives.
That's right. Yeah, just sit there and be a vegetable in front of the television and take your Soma and be good and vote Democratic.
Now here you go. How about when alcohol suppresses your ADH? Not sure what that is. It causes your kidneys to release more water, which is why you pee more when you drink. So I've always wondered, is it the volume of liquid? So if I drank 4 pints of water and 4 pints of beer, would I have to go to the bathroom the same amount? So is there anything in the alcohol, or is it the... Go ahead.
Because alcohol is a diuretic.
Right.
It basically causes your body to take some of the water that it already has. I mean, most of your body's water anyway, right? So it takes some of that liquid from the rest of your body and expels it. So if you were to drink...
Which is why it dehydrates you. Because it's drawing water away.
So if you drank 4 pints of water, then you might just expel 4 pints of water, but if you drank 4 pints of beer, then you might expel more than 4 pints.
And that's got to be coming from somewhere.
Yeah, it's coming from the rest of your body, which dehydrates you, which is one of the reasons that you get a hangover. So one of the ways to avoid a hangover is to drink enough water.
Yes, the idea of drinking water before bed after drinking is something I'm well aware of and almost never do, because I feel like I'm going to be peeing all night anyway. Why do I even need to add to the problem? But that's probably a good idea.
No, it is a good idea to drink water after you've had a couple drinks. It's a good idea to drink some water.
But I've got another myth I got to deal with.
Okay,
breaking the seal. It's like I haven't had to pee up until this point. Now that I've peed, oh boy, now I'm going to have to start peeing every 15 minutes because you've broken the seal.
I'd never heard that one before.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that one a lot. It's like, that's not why you... It's just that your body has sort of reached this level from the beer you've been drinking to get the process started. But it's not like if you had held on to not going to the bathroom, you'd be better off. I don't know what the whole break the seal.
No, I've never even heard that one before. It sounds a little crazy to me. So the idea is like kind of like you punctured the balloon.
Yeah. So back to the hangover. Congeners. Are you familiar with that word? Is it, or the pronunciation of that? So all alcohol is the same, right? Alcohol is just alcohol.
Yeah.
But different types contain different levels of congeners, or what give alcoholic beverages their color, aroma, and flavors.
I don't know that word.
Congeners include, I'm just going to say it, yes, because Gen, yeah.
Okay.
Congeners include acetone,
acetaldehyde, and tannins.
Right. And these things contribute to different degrees of...
Well, that makes sense. Sure.
And so what you're going to have is darker colored beverages are going to have more than lighter ones. And so if you're not adding a bunch of other additives, you're going to be better off with your gins and your vodkas than your rums and your...
The dark rums and the whiskeys, yeah.
But when you often encounter those in these sweet, fruity, tropical drinks, and now you've introduced a whole new level.
Yeah, the sugar is going to cause more trouble than anything else.
And this has the headache. When you consume 1 unit of alcohol, your body expels 3 to 4 units of water, causing dehydration.
Right.
This water loss causes shrinkage of your tissues, and since your skull doesn't shrink, your shrinking brain pulls on the connective tissues and causes a headache, the main feature of a hangover.
Interesting. So the reason you have a headache is because your brain is shrinking inside your skull.
It's due to dehydration.
Well, dehydration. That's pretty interesting.
What do you know?
Yeah, so what you really need to do then is just like inject some water into your brain.
That could be the next great invention.
There you go.
Yeah. What is that thing coming out of your head? Well, it's my anti-hangover.
Exactly. You just have a little valve here, and then you wear a hat that has like a bunch of water in it, and it just...
Oh, you mean the Pigweed Crowhill device?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there you go. And it's just like keeps your brain hydrated.
Not the most attractive thing in bars, but next morning...
Well, it could be a stylish hat. It could be a stylish hat, with the... Yeah. The trick, though, is getting the port just right, so that the water goes in.
Right. So, so the reasoning of your kidney will process at about 1 drink per hour.
Right.
And that's the
rule that we learned.
And that's the rule, and that's legit.
Yeah.
It really is. And, but, boy, that's a lot of pacing.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so that's the kind of the overview of liquor. We talked about where it came from and the different types of liquor and all kinds of myths and everything else.
The myths and the science behind it. And here, let's finish off this glass of booze here.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks so much for listening to Beer and Conversation with Pigweed and Crowhill. Remember to visit us at pigweedandcrowhill.com or send us an email at pigweedshow@gmail.com.